how are you thinking about that process of creating chaos and then providing a solution for it with Project Hail Mary? Like, what was your approach to setting things up this time around?
Well, it actually went a little bit backwards for Project Hail Mary. For The Martian, as you know from the interview with Joe, I was thinking about how we could put humans on Mars, what might go wrong, what if all these things go wrong, and then, like as I said, the increasingly desperate things you'd have to do to stay alive might make for a good story. In Artemis, my second book, I was thinking about what is humanity's first city that is not on Earth going to look like? Where is it going to be? What's it going to be like? And why would they build it at all? And so on. And that's what ultimately led me to Mars. So it generally starts with kind of science or futuristic speculation. And I do that stuff all the time, but sometimes I speculate and I come up with a unique or what I think is a unique or interesting story idea, then I run with it. Project Hail Mary worked kind of the other direction. After I wrote The Martian and before I wrote Artemis, I was actually working on a book called Zhek, Z-H-E-K, Zhek. And I got 70,000 words into that. For reference, The Martian is about 100,000 words. I got 70,000 words into Zhek, and I realized it sucked. It was just no good. Plot wasn't coming together. Characters weren't interesting. I was still in the first act. It was going to be some gigantic tome nobody was going to want to read, and it was just a mess. And it was kind of unsalvageable, so I ditched it, and I said, like, okay, well, I don't even know what to do with this, but this is not working. And so that's when I ultimately wrote Artemis instead as my second book, and I'm really glad I did, because Zhek was just a train wreck.
So you got 70,000 words into Zhek, and then did you completely discard it? Did you take things from Zhek and you're like, this is good, but I don't want to put it out? Yes.
I'm glad you asked. There were a couple of diamonds in the rough in Zhek, a couple of good concepts that I thought could be used for stories. And one thing in Zhek, I had this could be a minor spoiler for Project Hail Mary, but not that big one.
Sure.
Was the concept of a spacecraft fuel that can basically store energy. It's basically the theoretical best energy storage for a spacecraft fuel, where you can propel yourself with light, and it does like literal mass conversion to do that. And in Zhek, it was a technology that some people had invented. But I got to thinking about that. In Zhek, it was called black matter. And the cool thing about black matter was it would absorb any electromagnetic radiation, any light, any photons, anything that hit it, which is why it was called black matter, because it would absorb all light. And it would turn that just into mass, which it would store and get bigger and bigger. And then you could use that to, you could release the light basically to propel a ship around. Thought that was kind of cool. And I got to thinking, like, well, that would be neat. Like, that would be this awesome spacecraft fuel. That would be, you could do interstellar trips with it if you wanted. And I was thinking, I wonder like how I could write a story about that, but without all the other stuff in Zhek. I'm like, well, we don't have remotely the technology in modern day to invent something like that. I'm like, okay, so what if we found it somehow? It's like, okay, well, how would we find it? And then I thought, like, well, what if instead of a technology that was created, what if it was just a naturally evolved life form? And that's what I came up with the idea of. Oh, okay, it is a monocellular life form that does this. It collects energy, stores it. It stores it and then uses it as light to propel itself across space. I'm like, well, why would it do that? And how does it get all that energy? And those two things kind of answered each other. The way it gets all that energy is it doesn't live on a planet. It lives on the surface of stars, where it collects enormous amounts of energy. And the reason it has that ability to propel itself through space is because that's how it spores out to other stars. It's like mold. It's not intelligent. It's just a monocellular life form doing its thing. And then I thought, like, oh, now that would be cool. So now we have this naturally evolved life form that does all this stuff and, lives on the surface of stars. And let's say humanity found some of that, and then we could breed it up in artificial conditions and then do cool space stuff. And I was like, oh, but they'd have to make sure to be really careful not to let any of it get on our sun, because then all hell would break loose. And I'm like, wait, all hell breaking loose is where stories come from. So
yeah, that's the chaos.
So hang on, let me back this up. It's not something we find, it's something that infects the sun. And then we figure it out and have to find a way to stop it. And then also, because it's infecting the sun, we have access to it, so we can use it as spacecraft fuel to go travel an interstellar distance. So now I need a reason for that. And so it all just started coming in backwards from that spacecraft fuel idea.